Am I projecting? Yes, that's happening. I assume this is simple. Yeah, look at that. Okay, great. So I'm going to talk about subversive comedy, which, well, specifically in the theorization that it receives in Alenka's wonderful book, The Odd One In, on comedy. I'm not really used to speaking about books in front of their author. I'm suddenly very, very self-conscious.
I can leave the room.
Yeah, would you mind? Being an 18th centuryist, it doesn't often happen. There is that shark that has been alive since the 18th century, but I've never spoken to him. So, subversive comedy. Alenka gives a wonderful analysis which contains a definition of what it is not. It is not a question of the content. It is not a question of which content is subjected to comical treatment. So that is not how we differentiate conservative comedy against subversive comedy. Mother Teresa, Lenin, machismo, feminism, the institution of the family, or the life of a homosexual couple is a question of the mode of the comic processing itself. So the first thing that Alenka's book invites us to do is not to fall into a straightforward trap of thinking of subversive and conservative forms of comedy across a conventional political spectrum. False conservative comedies are those where the abstract universal and the concrete do not change places and do not produce a short circuit. To explain this statement, we can return to Alenka's return to Hegel and the differentiation between the three classical genres. Epic, first of all, each of the classical genres in Alenka, Hegel, Lacan's analysis involves a different relationship between the concrete and the universal. In epic, the concrete individual minstrel sings the song of the universal myth. There is a synthetic meeting between the concrete and the universal. In tragedy, the actor puts on the mask and the universal speaks through the concrete individual, often with very painful results, as in Antigone. Comedy, meanwhile, invites us to think of it as perhaps the most radical of all the genres, because it involves the reversal of the universal into the concrete itself. And to really quickly outline Alenka's really clear example, maybe familiar to a lot of people here, if a dignified baron or solicitor or something, somebody with dignity walking down the road slips over on a banana skin, lands in dog shit, whatever, and we laugh, it remains conservative comedy if we are only laughing at the fact that this person should have dignity and has lost it. Why is it conservative? It's conservative if we continue to believe in solicitors. It's conservative if we continue to believe in the dignity of the baron and so on. The point at which such a comic scene would become subversive is when the baron, solicitor, dignified guy leaps up and carries on storming down the road, expecting us to still treat him with dignity. Because when is he more of a baron, solicitor, and so on, than when he is acting in that way? So in other words, the universal, this dignified kind of figure, is truly subverted when we realize that its universal quality is precisely its concrete one. True subversive comedy makes this collision of the concrete, or rather reversal of universal into the concrete. Now, what I'm interested in doing, first of all, is to slightly historicize this argument made in 2008, made in a context where Alenka is able to say that free will, humour, a positive attitude, and a distance towards all ideologies have become the principal mode of the dominant ideology. I found it very interesting to find this statement, very familiar from Alenka's work, Zizek's work, and so on, being made right at the moment of the financial crash, right at the moment of the provoking historical event that has led to a situation where, as much of these things may still have their truth, we can no longer say that having a kind of ironical distance towards all ideologies is the completely hegemonic mode as it was before 2008. Living in a time as we do of populism, of polarization of main political parties, we are now in a situation where, as it were, a kind of radicalism has become far more mainstream. So what does it mean to read this argument about subversive versus conservative comedy in a situation where we're no longer in a kind of end of history, third way, apolitical kind of universe? And that is really what I want to briefly talk about. If in Alenka's book she makes the case that that kind of ironical distance towards all ideologies did not lend itself to comedy, the question is, does our time now, with its greater polarization, do any better? And I think the answer would have to be no. All of those journalists who said when Trump got elected, oh, at least it will be good for satire, dead wrong. Barney Farmer, from that great satirical journal in the tradition of Rabelais, Viz magazine, has this to say: great satirists from Swift to Morris, Chris Morris, were quite unafraid to periodically turn around to their followers and say, actually, in this one, you're the twat. We're in an age of targeted satire, tools to flatter the prejudices and never disturb the worldview of desired demographics. So, in Farmer's view, the enormous number of satirical characters and creations and shows that have indeed been started in order to respond to this new post-2016 age of polarization fall down because none of them can be laughed at by anyone who doesn't already agree with the position held. And I think it's absolutely true of any number of comedies, whether the target is alleged social justice warriors, Trump, Corbyn supporters, even Tories, whatever the target of the satire is, in case after case, we find that, as it were, there is this kind of mirthless conservatism where, if I can put it this way, the comedy still believes in the good politician, still believes in the good teenager, the good undergraduate student, and is not willing to see the concrete aspect of the universal in that gesture. Things get even worse when we get to the extraordinary cottage industries online of what my friend Penny Andrews would call anti-fandom. That is, people who make these parodic Twitter accounts or social media accounts, tending them every day, creating content every day, all of them committed to one political individual who they despise. The libidinal economy of this is absolutely extraordinary. And we find this both in the enormous industry of centrist liberals who hate Jeremy Corbyn and find this something funny, the right's absolute obsession with AOC in America. But all of it, if you like, the centrists believe in a good Labour leader. They don't see the universal in its concrete aspect. The same is true of the right. So the question is whether there can be found any truly subversive comedy in our current situation. And my argument would be, yes, it is there, but it's not in the traditional kind of relationship of satire to satirized object. Actually, it's there in the way that anti-systemic political groupings talk about themselves. We've already heard a lot about the outright's use of a kind of what William Empson would call double irony, where I am joking, but I mean it. But what is maybe less noted is the way in which the outright's kind of semi-ironic attitude towards racism and neo-Nazism and so on was also applied to their relationship to Trump. They knew very well that he did not really believe in all the things. He doesn't believe in anything. He's not really their guy. He wasn't really going to create a white ethno-state. And yet, they used this kind of mock lionization as a sort of means of binding them together, binding disparate groups together in order to support them. A couple of quotes about outright people admitting that they know Trump isn't really their guy. The Yang Gang supporting Andrew Yang's candidacy for the Democrats. Again, these are right-wingers supporting a kind of quasi-tech-bro socialists. Again, there's a similar kind of subversive irony to that. And we find it on the left as well. This is where I would argue that Alenka was prescient in giving political names to seemingly apolitical, phenomenological kinds of comedy. In 2008, it was possible to read that analysis and say, okay, conservative comedy against subversive comedy, but isn't this just a kind of formalism? How does this apply to actually existing politics? Well, I would say that we are seeing it come about in this way. Jeremy Corbyn as the absolute boy. Jeremy Corbyn as the man with the big bag of cans with the lads. Deal with it. The Run DMC imitation T-shirts. And my personal favourite, Arm John McDonnell now. 100% behind that, not ironically. So here, of course, these guys from the dandruff left are not real Maoists. Of course, this peacenik, teetotal old guy is not the absolute boy, is not a football lad, but we'll still make the football chant. Because what are we saying? We're saying that there isn't a kind of universal form of socialist leader outside the concrete. Actually, for us to have a kind of political grouping that is bound together libidinally and so on, to have the people as construct, as Chantal Mouffe would have it, we have to make this recognition that the social forms that are going to bind that together, well, I'm saying they can include this particular kind of subversive comedy, where the comedy is turned inward. The concretization of the universal is turned onto our own side, as opposed to that of our political enemies. Anyway, I must stop. Yeah.